So, Bryn and Lisa, yay! Okay, welcome to tonight's deep dive investigation into the Amityville murders, which is truly quite shocking. We have so much information to get through in this episode, so it'd be unjust to rush everything into the one episode, so we've decided to break it down.
That's right, Bryn. And tonight we have a sponsor. Woo! But more on that later. Stay tuned to the end of the show as we will be giving comments a unique code for discounts.
So me and my co-host have decided to break the Amityville murders into 2 episodes. Once we have covered the story in its entirety, we'll make the 2 episodes into one show and make it available to listeners on our basic homepage below. So if you go below, it will be in our homepage, and also on all major podcast platforms, if I can get that word out, and including YouTube.
First, I'd like to kick off by thanking our sponsor, Oriental Drift.
Yay!
OD Collective,
Yay!
as it's known. OD is a fashion brand that caters for all tastes and has clothes for both men and women. I seriously love their hoodies and have their dream catcher hoodie on right now. It's so cozy and trendy and warm. But as Bryn said, we give an exclusive discount code to every comment and everyone who leaves a message on our chat board at the end of the show. So stay tuned.
And leave those messages below. Okay, just to let you know, Lisa, I've actually got, earlier on today I had the Yoker's double-sided bomber, and it was throwing it down with rain because I went out to get some hedgehog food and I got absolutely drenched. But the hoodie actually kept me warm, so I'm like, yay. And dry as well, that's the most important.
That's amazing. So the British weather, hey? And the hoodie and your coaster, double-sided bomber was amazing and trending, kept you warm and dry.
Definitely.
Brilliant. And I hope the hedgehog's all right.
Oh, thank you,
babe. Lots of love and light.
Definitely. I've been playing American Tales song to her, and she's been sitting on my chest, so I'm like, bless her cotton
little
socks.
hedgehog Monroe.
I know.
I love you.
Adorable.
I love you so much too.
Oh, you've ordered your jacket though, haven't you?
But I've ordered that jacket today.
I know.
I have ordered that jacket today. So this is so weird. Anyway, let's go on with the show. Remember, everyone, stay tuned to the end to get your exclusive discount code.
Definitely.
After the success of last week's case, where we covered the murder of Travis Victor Alexandra, we decided to look at other similar cases that would get your Wednesday wine juices flowing.
Ching, ching.
Well, here we are with another wine and crime. This case has it all: murder, organised crime and the supernatural. I actually slept with the lights on after reading the crime report.
No, I did as well. It actually sends chills down my spine discussing this subject. Just to give you a good idea anyway, everyone that's listening, is what to expect on today's show and the next episode. What we've done is broken them into 2 separate episodes. So in the first episode, basically, we're breaking it down into 2 episodes. So episode 1, we will cover Ronald DeFeo Jr.'s massacre of his family and the puzzling speed and the scale of the killings, which is very interesting, with a bit of background on him and his family's life. So we'll give a brief of the entirety of the scenario from the beginning to up until the murder and the massacre. Episode 2 on the 17th of June will focus on the aftermath, including George and Kathy Lutz's and their 3 children's claims of paranormal activity that destroyed their lives while residing at 112 Ocean Avenue. When I mention, Lisa, when I actually mention Amityville, what springs to mind for you?
Besides Thomas Ryan Reynolds.
Pervert.
Well, for me, it's the unimaginable horror and the hauntings, and obviously the film series. Ryan Reynolds.
Psycho.
It's a bit of alright, isn't it?
Well, besides the Ryan Reynolds part, you can blame Janderson's novel, published in September 1977, for all that. Now, despite the book's claim that it recalls the true story of the hauntings within its walls, there's evidence that the residents of 1112 Ocean Avenue, George and Kathy Lutz, fabricated the entirety of the story for financial gain. But it wasn't entirely fabricated, however. The murders that occurred in the home before the Lute's occupation was indeed true and terrible.
The catalyst for the spirits for the haunting.
Yeah, definitely
112 Ocean Avenue. Before we get to the haunting, we need to start at the beginning though. Big Ronnie, as he was known to family and friends, Ronald Joseph DeFeo Sr. was born on November
That is
16th.
a tongue twister, isn't it, babes?
It is 1930. To parents Rocco and Antoinette DeFeo. When he was younger, Big Ronnie was said to be reminiscent of Rudolph Valentino.
Who's that?
With such a suave demeanour.
Babe, do you know what? Honestly,
of Louise Marie Brigante, who was born on November the 3rd, 1931, to Michael and Angelo Brigante.
Who the hell is Rudolph Valentino? Do you know, babe?
He sounds like a designer. He sounds like a designer. I've got to hold my hands up.
He's an actor.
Sure.
Oh, he's an actor.
Oh, he's an actor.
Our producers just said he's an actor. So, right, okay. So, yeah, but you've got up to the part with Louise. So, sorry, I hate interrupting you, babe. I had no idea.
No, you have to, because people will be interested in, knowing the ins and outs.
Oh, no. But
so with all this, such a suave demeanour, he attracted the attention of Louise Marie Brigante, who was born on November 3rd, 1931, to Michael and Angela Brigante. Louise had wanted to pursue a modelling career. She must have been such a beautiful, beautiful girl.
Yeah, she was though, wasn't she?
She was absolutely beautiful. Pursuing a modelling career, young at heart, and world is your oyster. But after a brief courtship with Big Ronnie, the lovers got married. Since the Brigantes disapproved of Big Ronnie, so her parents did not like Big Ronnie.
Good.
No, it's not good. They didn't like Big Ronnie Sr. Louise was allegedly forced by her husband to cut all ties with her family. That's quite hard.
It was.
Till September the 25th, 1951, when Ronald Joseph DeFeo Jr. was born.
DeFeo Jr. was born, yeah, that's strange. I've actually just Googled that actor, and he was in a movie called...
Isn't it complicated, though?
It is.
It is. It's such a shame. You meet someone, you've got your whole ambitions ahead of you, you're young, you're beautiful, you've got your whole life ahead of you, and you want to be happy and get married, and then parents disagree, and then you meet up with someone, you have your first child, and it all goes...
monkeys up, as the saying goes. I actually just googled that the actor that we were talking about. He was in a movie called in 1921. So this is bloody years ago. 1921. He started in a movie called The Sheik. Yeah. Then he starred in part 2, the Son of the Sheik, in 1926. That was. And then he also starred in 1922 Blood and Sand, and also a movie called Beyond the Rocks in 1922.
Oh, there you go. Well, you've refreshed my memory. It's good to refresh your memories.
Well, I had no idea who the hell he was.
What a legend, eh?
So, anyway, it was said while growing up, Butch DeFeo had it hard due to him being the firstborn and a boy. His father expected more from him. He demanded Butch to be a high achiever, but Butch's lack of effort would often lead to Big Ronnie disciplining his son in what was alleged in court documents to be the cruelest of fashions. 1 minute he would be hug his son, the next minute he would throw him across the room and black his eyes. Louise's brother would later testify at the DeFeo trial about an incident he witnessed when Butch was just 2 years old. Bridget said, "We were all sitting down in the basement watching TV, and I don't know, the boy had done something. All of a sudden he stood up, the father had just pushed the boy this way into the wall, the boy banged his head, or part of his shoulder or something." So the guy obviously is not very... he can't commit to what he saw, but he obviously saw the dad act in a violent way to his nephew.
Yes, that's right. But besides being an underachiever, Butch was also overweight. And if he wasn't being beaten at home, he was being tormented at school, where his peers would call him names like the Blob.
Oh, God.
A reference to a film of the same name starring Steve McQueen.
I must say, I've never watched The Blob, the original, but I have watched the remake. I think it's in the 90s. One of my colleagues, Nick Benson, that worked on the Hailing book with me actually did the special effects for that movie. So it's crazy.
Oh wow, you've had an interesting adventurous life, rubbing shoulders with these people. Wow.
Oh bless.
But this again segregated him further as he began to experiment with amphetamines, eventually shedding his excess body weight.
Well, yeah, because do you know
July the 29th, 1956.
Before you go on, babes, do you know amphetamines though? In Hollywood, a lot of people use amphetamines, including asthma things, to actually they use the asthma inhaler because it actually suppresses appetite. So that's how they actually lose weight. We don't condone it though.
Yeah, it's not healthy though, is it? You can lose weight by exercise and cutting out calories and eating regular small portions.
Or drinking turmeric.
Healthy, exactly. But on July the 29th, 1956, Louise gave birth to a daughter, Dawn Teresa DeFeo. A few years later, on August 16th, 1961, she gave birth to Allison Louise DeFeo. And then again on September the 4th, 1962, to Marc Gregory DeFeo. Shortly after the birth of Marc, Louise decided to leave her husband for reasons that still remain unclear. To get his wife back, Big Ronnie decided to put his writing talents to good use. Needing to express his love for his wife, Big Ronnie co-wrote a song called The Real Thing, and in 1963, jazz great Joe Williams, who sang with big bands such as the Count Basie Orchestra and the Lionel Hampton Orchestra, and with his combos recorded the song for the album titled One is a Lonesome Number.
Definitely is, with all those tongue twisters in there.
It is, it's a lot to digest, isn't it? And what a journey, Louise having all her, giving birth to all the children.
It was quite succession.
He wooed her back with music. Music is the soul of the heart, so they say.
It is. She had them in quite quick succession. Do you know, if it wasn't because I questioned this part. Yeah, do you know in this part where she actually leaves her husband? Now, one thing I was wondering, was it to do with his violence tendencies, or did she have depression because of having so many children in such a short space of time? Could it have been something to do with having children? It could have been a chemical imbalance. You never know. If it wasn't violence, we don't know though. Not enough evidence.
You set off in your life with you get married and you have your children, then it's a lot of hard work.
It is.
You have one after the other. It's a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of hard work. Your hormones are up and down, and then you're dealing with a violent, husband, Ronnie.
Allegedly. We always say that word, allegedly. But it is difficult bringing up a family, and all those siblings, one after the other in particular, can really, really be a massive responsibility. So possibly, yes. Possibly she left him to escape something that she couldn't cope with. Yeah, it's awful.
Exactly. But then on October 24th, 1965, Big Ronnie was blessed with a third son, John Matthew DeFeo. And by this time, the family had moved from their Brooklyn apartment to the affluent Long Island South Shore community of Amityville.
Do you know how one of the things which I always say, the word affluent, because I've been to Long Island. Now, one of the things that I noticed was obviously the Dutch colonial homes that they're scattergunned all over the small community. But what astonished me is that it's a very, very isolated town, or I'm not sure how you'd put it. But I didn't actually think it was that affluent. But I might be wrong. I thought, it'd be a lot more expensive living in Brooklyn than it would in...
The houses, the houses are mansions, aren't they? They're mansions.
Do you know what we would call...
far apart.
Yeah, we would call them mansions in England.
Exclusive.
We would definitely call them mansions because of the how stately they are and how much land they've actually got, because you wouldn't get that in the UK for the price that they paid. If you compared that to, you know, even a regular home, you wouldn't got what they purchased the house for. But yeah, the DeFeo's newly purchased residence was a large 3-storey Dutch colonial home built in 1925. The property was long and narrow, and the dark shingled house sat sideways, with the front facing onto the elongated driveway. At the end of the DeFeo's 237-foot long lot sat a boathouse, right at the edge of the Amityville Creek. Amityville Creek faces Amityville High, and during my visit, literally, do you know if you look at because I sent you the photographs, if you walked the back way to look at the house from the end, you've got Amityville High opposite. Well, you can't really, it is there, you can see it. It's as if you look from, my apartment, you can see the park over the back, so it's a lot of green, as you know. So that's what you can see.
A lot of green, so that's what you're buying into.
Yeah.
And you've got all the beautiful scenery and the exclusivity, and it's quaint.
Exactly.
It's a very pretty village. It sounds like the perfect place to reside as a family. Definitely.
Well, basically, the previous, you could actually get access from the main road originally. There was originally a path, but they've actually removed the entirety of the path. So if you walk down the street to enter Ocean Avenue, there used to be a path on the left and the right side, but they've actually removed the path, and they actually, I keep saying that word, lads, actually, but the grass of the people's properties now extend where the path used to be, so you're actually walking on private property to get to the property. But during the period where the DeFeos lived at 112 Ocean Avenue, they set their property apart by putting a statue of 3 children figurines praying to a large statue of St. Joseph holding the baby Jesus. A kitschy lamp also sat on their garden, stating High Hopes, a symbolic title for the family's life in suburbia. But the most distinguishable character of the property was the 2-quarter-moon windows that looked like eyes, a feature common in Dutch colonial homes or properties. I prefer the word properties. I hate the word homes. So anyway, in the early 1970s, Big Ronnie decided that he wanted a series of life-size portraits created to immortalise his family and their fresh start in Pleasantville. So once more, Big Ronnie's father-in-law, Michael Brigante Sr, who purchased the property for the family, picked up the tab, which was estimated to be around $50,000. When the portraits were completed, they were hung in the large golden frames on the staircase wall between the first and second floors of the DeFeo home. During the period the family lived in Ocean Avenue, the DeFeo family's inner sanctum began to collapse, and as Butch matured, he began lashing out physically against his father as well as his friends. His concerned family took it upon themselves to take him to see a psychiatrist, but the visits didn't sit well with Butch, who denied that he needed any help whatsoever, so the trips to the doctor stopped, and in their place the DeFeos used incentives such as cash and gifts, including a $14,000 speedboat, hoping that the gifts would pacify their son. Basically, I'm trying to read this and it's giving me a lot of tongue tie. Basically, the family literally gifted him to make him a good boy and play ball. And the 14,000 speedboat that you see in the movie, the original movie, was actually Butchie's actual speedboat. So that's a bit weird, but yeah.
Well, exactly. But this new tactic only made the problems worse. And by the ripe old age of 17, DeFeo had moved on from amphetamines to harder drugs, including LSD and heroin. Eventually, he was expelled from school for his violent outbursts. Oh my God, but despite his academic setbacks, the DeFeos continued to reward him.
Oh,
and at the age of 18, DeFeo received a prize position at his grandfather's car dealership.
You know,
with little to no
Lisa,
I mean, what are they thinking?
I know, beat up your father, throw chairs around, and then you just say, okay, get a job at your grandfather so you actually don't have to do a day's work. It's insane.
It's insane. They are
off their rocker.
They're setting themselves up for a fall.
They were. It's awful.
They were. But anyhow, he also earned a weekly stipend from his father, regardless of his attendance for the job or not, performance at work or
So
not.
basically, besides having a job and getting paid by his grandfather for working at the car lot, his father also set up a weekly allowance that is absolutely off its rocker.
I mean, it doesn't make sense.
Hey,
I mean, we've come from medieval days, we've come from Victorian days, and we've now gone to an era where you're actually rewarding your children for misbehaviour.
I know.
And applauding them for making crazy things.
I know.
No wonder
It's
he got
basically
messed up, Ronald Bush.
it's like inject yourself with heroin, smash up the house, you know, beat your pick friends up at school, get expelled, take LSD. So he's tripping, beating his family and friends up, and he's got a job at his grandfather's gala. You don't have to go to work, but if you do go to work, great. But we're still going to give you a weekly allowance so you can go and blitz it on, whatever you want to blitz it on. It's off its rocker. It's mad.
And guess what happened from that?
Go on.
Their son rewarded his father's gifts with DeFeo, then funneled his salary into buying a new car and a shotgun and alcohol.
No, that was actually a tongue twister, wasn't it? So basically,
It was.
his father continued to pay him money, and the money which his father was giving him for not turning up to work, being expelled from school, he then went and bought a gun and a car and more alcohol. Lovely.
Exactly. So, you know, he's done all these crazy things, and now he's gone and bought a gun and
Crazy.
he's an alcohol and a car. He's just on the loose. He's a loose cannon. He's a loose cannon in the making.
Yes.
Anyhow, his strange behaviour after the purchase of his gun only increased and led to several serious alterations. One such incident saw Butch threaten a friend with a rifle during a hunting trip.
Oh.
And he also attempted to shoot his father.
Can I just say, me and you do not condone hunting. We must state that fact. But obviously, we're talking in the 70s where, you know, people still hunt now. But it's like, so, yeah.
Well, hunting's always been a popular sport for generations.
Yeah.
But the fact he threatened his friend on a hunting trip, and then he also attempted to shoot his father during a fight between his parents. So his mum and dad were obviously still having a lot of difficulties in the marriage. And then the gun malfunctioned. The incident foreshadowed the more violent events to come. So that night, he attempted to shoot his father.
So he went on a hunting trip.
The gun malfunctioned, but he could have blown his father's brains up
Exactly.
that night.
So his father took him. Yeah. So his father and his friend. He went with his father. So I presume it's his father and his father's friend's father and his friend, and they all went on a hunting trip. He attempted to shoot his friend. Then when he got home after his father and his mum were having a complete violent spitting row, then he went to shoot his father. But if it wasn't for the gun, the massacre could have happened a lot earlier, prior to 1969.
The signs were there.
74, sorry.
Butch's intentions to kill was there and then. He was ruthless. He was insane. He didn't care. He was going to do it there and then, and it didn't work. In 1969, Butch began seeing Geraldine Rulio Ramondo after meeting her on the club scene in New York and Greenwich Village. Geraldine, whose family was allegedly extensively involved in organised crime, became a regular feature on Butch's arm. And this was confirmed by William Davidge, Dawn DeFeo's boyfriend at the time of the murders. William recalled that Geraldine was on the scene right up until the murders in 1974. Two of Butch's close friends, Barry Springer and Chuck Shrewsbury, also confirmed this and later wrote affidavits attesting to the fact that Geraldine was Butch's wife prior to the murders and the mother of Butch's daughter. Nevertheless, Geraldine...
I never knew Butch had a daughter. That's shocking.
There's really not much information about Butch having a wife and a daughter. Even I didn't know that, because you watch the Amityville Horror, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. She's been erased.
When you watch the Amityville Horror, if you don't mind me saying, and this is my personal experience from growing up with it, I remember the supernatural side.
Yeah. I like the second one.
This comes from a tragic, horrific tragedy and murder. But my knowledge of it growing up is supernatural, and somewhere we all believe this. You know, it's supernatural, but really it's started with here's the story.
But you know, as you know, there's one thing before we go on with the actual story. There is actually one. It's very, very commonly known that if somebody dies in a violent struggle, or if they die in something which is so tragic, they die in a you know, a psychic will probably tell you, if somebody dies in a terrible tragic, such as a violent death or stuff, then they can't actually move on, and they're not, that when you actually die, then your body becomes stuck in that moment of their death, and then they have to keep replaying it. That's why allegedly, I say allegedly because I don't know much about it, but that's why you get spirits that can't move on, and they remain on Earth or in our realm or our
it's very, very, very true. So if you die suddenly, you become stuck and trapped and confused to where you are.
Plane, that's the word, isn't it?
You can, as a spirit, you can actually stay on Earth.
I know, or
you have a smooth ending and you pass on. But I do believe the Amityville, the house itself and the grounds it's on, has a lot of tormented spirits.
I agree with you, but I think probably the tormented spirit came from, but we can talk about in the next episode.
Yes, exactly.
But I think they probably came from the.
Geraldine, who was later convicted of cheque fraud, was erased from the DeFeo's timeline entirely, allegedly by Peter DeFeo.
Gosh. Peter DeFeo was born in Little Italy in 1902 and became associated with the Genova crime family, working closely with boss Vito, who died in 1969, who was said to be the Al Capone of Greenwich Village crew, where Geraldine met Butch. It's also interesting to know that Vito trafficked heroin, a drug Butch purchased from Bobby Geiger shortly after the murders of his family. Geiger was a small-time dealer of heroin, much like Brittany Murphy's father, Angelo Bertolotti, who was also had ties to the Greenwich Village crew, which I covered in my best-selling book, A Case for Murder, Brittany Murphy Files. But anyway, I'll stick to facts. During the 1970s, the heroin market was controlled by the mafia. Butch's ever-growing heroin debits left him fearing for his life and retaliation. To make matters worse, all the alleged mafia associates, such as Louise DeFeo, spent time actually at the DeFeo residence in Amityville and was allegedly extremely closest to Butch's father and Peter DeFeo. So it's, you know, he actually put himself in a situation where his father could find out that he was doing heroin. His uncle, or whoever this guy Peter DeFeo was, probably knew about it, and he also had an alleged mafia associate hanging out in the same household he lived. So it was quite crazy. But prior to the massacre,
it sounds very tricky.
It
sounds
is
very dodgy.
It's
the
like
plot gets thicker, doesn't it? The plot gets thicker.
Well, I actually think that it's from the sounds of what we have in front of us. The actual family were tied up in the mafia. That's how it sounds, or small time mafia. I don't know. But
it does sound very underworld, doesn't it?
It does. But prior to the massacre in late October 1964, Butch staged a mock robbery with a friend, Arthur Boleyn, stealing $20,000 from his grandfather's car lot to cover his debit. The robbery went off without a hitch until police came to the dealership where Butch worked to question him. Instead of calmly answering the officers' questions, DeFeo exploded into a blind rage, which raised red flags with law enforcement officers. Butch quickly stopped cooperating with the police, leading to his father to suspect his son had actually committed the robbery. It's mad. As well as Butch finding life difficult at home during this time, the upheaval also affected Dawn, who was also struggling. Her boyfriend, who you've mentioned earlier, alleged that Dawn, who was also close to Butch, had also begun using drugs to cope with her home life. Her father forbid her from actually travelling with her boyfriend before the murders on holiday to Florida, causing Dawn to fly into a blind rage. God, the family actually all seem like, well, they seem like a pressure cooker. It's crazy.
It's not a very normal average upbringing, is it?
Not really. But when I actually travelled to Amityville, I spoke to one person at the Amityville library that said the family was deep into organised crime, and they were it was quite commonly known that the home was actually a hotbed of violence, and Dawn had a very similar streak to her brother. So for me,
they must have been ducking and diving left, right, and centre.
So, but they do say in Amityville, and they've got, if you go to the Amityville library, they've got a huge library, and it's got all the articles and clippings from the murder and any incident prior to the murder. And, you know, in the movie, Dawn seems really innocent and nice, but they did say she had a temper like a brother.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, because they all influence each other, and you're in that environment, and
it's not good.
It's not a healthy environment at all. It's very sad, it's very tragic, and that's why it ended in the way it did.
Yeah, it is.
Sadly to say, it did, yes.
It's crazy.
It is.
But after the alleged robbery, Butch and his accomplice didn't return back to work for 2 hours. On this day, they actually arrived back at work at 3:30 p.m. Butch reported that he and Arthur Berlin had been robbed at gunpoint while they were waiting at the red light. Ronald Sr, who was at the dealership when his son returned with his accomplice, exploded into a blind rage as well when he heard Butch's story, berating the company's administrator who had sent him in the first place. Oh, it's totally absurd. At that point, Butch battered the hood of a car vehicle in his grandfather's lot and took out his rage with his colleagues. So, do you know, so basically the father was raging at the staff at the car dealership. Then Butch started raging at the people in the car, at the dealership as well. Mad. One witness alleged Butch threw a chair at the admin office window where his grandfather was retired to. This, however, cannot be substantiated, but fits with a pattern of behaviour that was quite common with Butch. So, well, we know it's pretty common anyway, because he got expelled from school for being violent, and we know he tried to shoot his friend on a hunting trip, and also tried to shoot his father after the hunting trip. Nightmare.
That's right, and his dad, showered him with gifts, and he's also been subject as growing up to violence and trying to split, the fights up with his mum and dad, and this can really affect a child and mental state of mind.
I do feel
he turned to drugs the wrong way. He took the wrong path in life.
I do feel though it's probably accumulation of things with his Butch. I think he was put a lot of pressure on growing up by his father and being the firstborn, and now because instead of teaching him right from wrong, they would probably say that's wrong, but then in the same sentence they would then give him £1,000 to go out, or $1,000 to go out and buy something to treat himself, in the vain hope it would alter his behaviour. It's crazy.
Well, that's giving the wrong signals off, isn't it, to a child, that they think that if they do naughty things, they'll get rewarded.
I know, you say no,
in the kind of
but
way,
then
doing these corrupt naughty things.
I know, you say no, then you're sharing the gifts.
And on the Friday before the murders, Butch was contacted again by the police about the robbery. This time they wanted him to examine some mugshots of local thieves in the hope he could possibly point out the robbers. This tactic was arranged by his father, Ronald Sr, to force Butch into an admission. To Ronald Sr.'s surprise, Butch initially agreed, but pulled out at the last minute. When Ronald Sr. heard of this, he confronted his son at work, demanding to know why he wouldn't cooperate with the police. One eyewitness, who still resides in Amityville, stated she heard Butch's father yell, "You've got the devil on your back." To which Butch replied, "You fat prick, I'll kill you." Oh, he
God,
then
that's
ran to his car and sped off.
that
This
actually
is the
reminds me of a Lady
last
Gaga
confrontation.
song.
It's what?
It
Sorry.
reminds me of a Lady Gaga song. So that's crazy.
Oh, it
I
reminds
can't
you,
remember
yeah.
the monster song. I can't remember what it was, but actually that reminds me of.
This was the last confrontation that his father, Ronald Sr, and Butch had before the murders. I mean, this was a build-up. It's like a pressure cooker.
Do you know it
of
so
something.
was? You know,
It's from the whole upbringing,
Well-
the disasters, the rows, his all his corrupt behaviour, taking the drugs, his mental health issues,
I
to
know.
rewarding him with gifts. This was
So, you know, this is one thing that really, about this case, that wasn't in any of the movies, which for me is, it highlights the gravity of the situation, that the father would say, no, that's wrong,
Yes.
but here's $1,000 to go and buy yourself whatever you want to buy. So he's saying no, but in the second breath, he's then basically gifting his son. So it's kind of like it's rewarding
his son.
yeah, exactly. So it's kind of
And his son must have been so confused because he's feeling that if he does all these bad things, he's going to get rewards.
So if
and
you-
those rewards are acceptable.
Exactly.
And
It's
all
like
this is building up to some really messed up
It
mental
is.
behaviour.
Well, he's
It's
basically
not the
saying,
way.
he's basically
Not the way
saying,
to bring
it's
up
all
children.
right. It's all right to try and shoot your friend on a hunting trip. It's all right to try and shoot me. Well, it's not. That's really bad. That's terrible. But here's $1,000 to go and buy this, go and buy that. So it's kind of like, in one breath he's saying it's not okay to do this, but then he's saying, yeah, it's all right because I'm going to give you money for being bad. So it's conflicting, it's confusing signals. He's giving
It's
really
totally-
confusing signals.
Totally.
It's
He's
crazy.
sending out, the parents are sending out, particularly his father and his grandfather,
Yeah.
are sending out the wrong signals to a child.
Well, we
who's
don't
very
know much
troubled.
about. Yeah, we don't know much about his
Allegedly.
grandfather, though, do we? Because it doesn't actually, from what we've looked at
Yeah.
in the police files, his grandfather doesn't really play too much of a role other than he's at his car lights. But it's still not okay. But that's where I'm.
No, it's very messed up. It's very, very messed up, and it's enough
Exactly.
to send spiral a child, growing up child,
Yeah.
who's subject to violence within his.
It reminds me
father.
actually of. Do you remember? I don't know if you know much about it. It reminds me of Johnson and Johnson's daughter. I'm just gonna Google this very quickly before we get back on. She dated a girl from Johnson and Johnson. You know who Johnson & Johnson are? They're they're the big. They deal with baby stuff and all that.
Johnson's and Johnson's. They do the
Yeah.
baby lotion, all the baby products. So
And
they're still going strong now.
They
It's
are.
viral
Well,
products.
the Casey Johnson was dated a socialite, Tia Tequila, who also was on MTV, and she did her own show, Finding Love. But Tia Tequila dated Casey Johnson. That was Johnson. She was related to the Johnson and Johnson empire, and she was on drugs. She would do several things that were inappropriate, I would deem, and it always hit the headlines.
Yeah.
But they still continued to give her money, so they were basically supporting that lifestyle.
The thing is, if you cannot support somebody who's addicted to like drugs and stuff,
No.
they're going to go and spend the money on drugs, aren't they?
Exactly.
They need help. They need
Exactly.
support. There's love and support is a lot more powerful than just giving them. Money's not the answer.
It
They'll
isn't.
just go and buy more drugs and alcohol like Ronald Butch did.
Exactly.
Anyhow, moving forward,
You definitely.
details after Butch leaving his grandfather's car lot are jumbled, but this may have a lot to do with his drug use. Allegedly, Butch drove to Greenwich Village that day. He then visited Geraldine, then went and saw a few dealers from the Greenwich Village crew before
No
getting high.
surprise. Do you know what? Honestly, he was on narcotics probation, so we never saw that in the movie. That was never actually told in the book. So
No.
He was already on narcotics probation for being.
Yes.
This is just crazy.
He was already under special narcotic probation.
That's what I mean.
Was certainly living life in the fast lane. But the movie, my memories of the movie is supernatural.
Yeah, that's the first one, though.
It takes you away from the actual, the solid foundation of the horrific crime, murders that took place.
Well,
and
do you know earlier?
Supernatural stuff.
Yeah, do you know earlier on? Well, after we did our live show, I actually went back and had a brief look at the read of the book, and the original book by Jay Anson only talks about the George and Kathy Lutz's time in the property. The second book obviously tells the story of the DeFeos, but they completely avoid all these facts. Like, he was on probation, he already had violent tendencies. They kind of like whitewash this and go over these huge, these huge concerns.
You kind of haven't. What's interesting with us, unearthing all of this, Bryn, on So Bryn and Lisa, is that you have an understanding of Ronald Butch Jr.
Yeah, exactly.
DeFeo, an understanding of him, because everyone just sees him as, he's done these horrific murders, he's in prison, he's still in there, they name and shame him, and yet really underneath.
But even the movie, though, do you know
the tough upbringing he had? How did he feel? Let's go to Ronald Butch.
Well, if we go back
Jr.
to Butch,
How did he feel being bullied by his father, being threatened by his father, having all the responsibilities as the older child?
Yeah.
How did he feel seeing his father abusive with the mother and trying to split them up? He grew big and stronger, and then he took his father on and threatened him. He got messed up in the head. He took the wrong way in life. We don't see all that.
Well, we heard he got messed up in. He actually, he got messed up in the head because of his narcotic abuse. One of the problems with taking illegal drugs is that the fact is it distorts your brain pattern and the way you think, because it actually affects the chemicals in the brain and also the chemicals in the body. And it also, believe it or not, if you do take drugs, it actually gives you like this because of the chemicals and the endorphins that it releases, it actually gives you like this additional, it gives you like this, I can't think of the word. It gives you an adrenaline. So when obviously he had these issues, like where he smashed up his granddad's car lot, bruising the bonnet of a car, throwing a chair at his grandfather's office, the admin office. He obviously had he was obviously on drugs during that period, and when he got obviously angry, it gave him an additional strength which he would not normally necessarily have. So
of course, you hear this time and time again.
Roid rage, steroids. Yeah, steroids.
And LSD in particular can make you do crazy things.
Because that's
and you hear it all the
hallucinogenic.
time. You hear voices, and allegedly Ronald Butch said he heard voices on the night telling him
That was the movie, though. That was the movie.
That's in the movie, yeah.
So,
allegedly.
That was in the
drugs
movie,
will
but
affect your brain function.
they
It's
do.
going to affect your actions.
But in his original statement, it was very matter of fact. He in fact blamed the mafia, which we'll talk about in episode 2.
Another item missing from the original reporting in all media was that at the time of the murder, Suffolk County's Babylon Probation Services had concerns about Butch's outbursts.
Exactly, there you go.
And he was under drug surveillance after his girlfriend, not Geraldine, turned him into police for stealing a $1,750 outboard motor.
What is one of those? Do we know what's an outboard motor?
It sounds like a car or a boat on the river.
Oh, so it was actually
outboard motor.
It was actually an engine of the boat. So do you know his speedboat?
Yeah, it sounds like something on the water.
Yeah, he obviously burnt his speedboat's motor out and then he robbed one. I don't know, I'm just guessing.
Right.
he robbed an outboard motor, so maybe he burnt his speedboat motor and needed to replace it, or alternatively he robbed it and tried to sell it. Who knows?
The theft took place on September 1973, and he was charged with grand larceny of the December 14th, 1973.
So September from 14 months before, he was already committing offences and he was already doing drugs. This is totally... It's a red flag to a bull.
He knew much different. He was quite clearly
troubled.
Not leading life holy, was he?
I know. Well, anyway, if we jump forward to April 1974, British probation officer actually discovered needle tracks in his arm and forced him to take a urine I'm getting this word time. He basically made him. Yes, he basically told him to take a wee test, which revealed traces of quinine, which is commonly used to dilute heroin. So basically, it was one of the substances that is used to break down the use of heroin, which then they turn into the liquid form before they put into the syringe before they inject it, because that is, well, sometimes they actually, because I watched a documentary on this, and they actually do mix other things to break down heroin. Some people actually mix toilet bleach. There's even caffeine now, and also paracetamol, lots of different things. But anyway, in his blood, they found Quinine. I'm not going to try and pronounce it, but there you go. They found traces of that, which was commonly used to dilute heroin in the 70s. But anyway, on May 29th, several checks later, Butch would test negative for heroin, and his family, specifically his father, put blocks in the probation service's way to protect his son and stop the family name actually getting embarrassed anymore. So obviously the probation officer wanted to continue these tests, and he was obviously going to the probation centre, but his father felt it unnecessary. He felt it an embarrassment on the family.
So his father, our father again is making decisions that are really going to support his son again.
I know.
Family.
So it's supporting his son's terrible behaviour.
Yes.
A member of the probation service stated the family was unwilling to admit their son was involved in drugs at all. The drug surveillance also recorded neighbours stating that Butch was an addict who drank and got into brawls at bars, and he appeared to... Gosh, I'm getting quite excited about this, but I shouldn't be, but it's getting all quite juicy. So basically, the drug surveillance that was surveilling him from part of the probation service spoke to the local neighbours, and basically the neighbours said that Butch used to drink, he got into bar brawls, and he appeared he had a somewhat unhealthy interest in his own sister Dawn. So that would play into the movie part 2, where they had an incestuous relationship. This is only obviously, I know, in the movie it was a bit weird, and in the book it was a bit weird. It implies that Butch and his sister had a relationship that was more on a sexual, if you know what I'm trying to say. But this obviously is only information that was provided to the probation officers after they interviewed locals. Anyway, Leonard Simmons, who represented Butch, stated he had doubts about whether Butch had the ability to help in his own defence, and requested a psychiatric examination. Now, we're going back to the case in December. So do you know when you said he was arrested and charged with grand theft larceny in December 1974?
Yes.
His actual representative who represented him at that case said he didn't feel Butch was actually criminally sane to be able to take the stand and actually tell the truth, and that was even back then. So this is mad.
Well, this brings us up to the night of the murders. To summarise Butch's character to date, he has a drink and drug problem.
Yikes.
He has violent tendencies due to his upbringing.
Well, there you go. His father gifts him, so that's also a terrible thing.
Exactly.
So it's a form of manipulation, isn't it, really? You do wrong, and we're going to gift you if in future you actually do better, which is a form of manipulation. So
which is going
it's
to
confusing.
encourage a child.
Confusing.
Encourage a child to
Continue.
do more crazy things.
Yeah, well, if it was me,
things.
I don't know if it would be you as well. If I went and did something wrong at school, and then my mum then went and bought me. In the olden days, I was obsessed with the Spice Girls. Cringe, I know. But if I used... Oh, and the Power Rangers. I know. Well, we went to the concert and that. But, you know, if I did wrong, I didn't go to school, which that was... well, anyway, that's none the wiser. But if I didn't go to school and my mum had a go at me and said, you must go to school, but then she went and bought me the Power Rangers magazine I wanted or a Spice Girls doll that I wanted, then I wouldn't bother going to school. Or I might go to school, but then if I didn't go to school and she did it the same again, then I'd realise that being not a great child and really being a great person, I would literally stop going to school because I knew my mum would gift me. So that's what I would do anyway. But anyway, besides his father manipulating him, he mixed with the Greenwich Village crew, who were involved in organised crime, and the alleged mafia association actually hung out at the DeFeo home and were close to his family, specifically his father and Peter DeFeo.
He worked closely with gangster boss Vito Genovese on the night of the massacre. I know, it sounds Italian.
I know.
On the night of the massacre, it's been alleged that Butch was seen with Geraldine.
Oh, hang on. So on the day, you've already touched on it, on the day he went, after the rage he had at his grandfather's Carlos, he then went to Greenwich.
Father, yes.
Yeah, he went to Greenwich Village, bought drugs, got stoned, and then he also hung out with, not particularly great people on that day, but then was also saw with his girlfriend when he arrived back in Long Island. So what was she doing in Long Island? That is a bit strange that on the day she was seen in Long Island. But yeah, carry on.
It's all connected, isn't it? It's like they're all still entwined in each other's lives and business and what they're doing and hanging out together. They're hanging out together. Allegedly, oh my God. Right, and a local also stated that he was seen with a girlfriend, or at least a girl he was seen around that time in 1974. This is obviously hearsay.
Definitely.
So I cannot stress
it's allegedly
the word alleged.
But hold on now. Before you move on, babes. So it was stated that by a local in the report that the police took that he was seen with Geraldine on the day. Okay, one local specifically stated Geraldine. Then another local said he was seen with a girlfriend, or at least a girl he was seeing. Right, now if you put that together with the Geraldine, that girlfriend or girl must have been Geraldine. That's how I'm seeing it.
Yes, that's how I see it as well.
So she was in Long Island. She was seen by one neighbour that particularly could point out it was Geraldine, and then later on another woman or male whom it might be.
Said he was seen with a girl, girlfriend. So he was seen with a girl, and someone said it was Geraldine.
Exactly.
Allegedly, which does make you.
It does question.
He's on a high, and she's got connection.
But she was in Long Island. She was in Long Island, so.
And she's in Long Island. It's all very suspicious,
dubious,
isn't it?
Yeah.
The ears prick, the alarm bells ring, you name it.
Exactly.
And it's been said that on the night of the massacre, the DeFeo household was in a frenzied state. According to Butch, after the evening's tirade, he and Dawn and two of Butch's friends proceeded to get high in the basement.
Ooh.
So Butch, with two of his friends, were in the basement getting high.
Oh, no.
Now, was the girl there? Was Geraldine there, the girl?
Well, no, because it was two of his friends. So,
two of his friends?
Yeah, so he went down to the basement. So it was Butch, Dawn, his sister, and two of his mates. But because Geraldine mixed in Greenwich Village with the, the people that dealt drugs. So did Butch meet her in Long Island? Because she came back over to Long Island and deal him the drugs. could that have been the relation? Because we already know she was done earlier on, and she was done for fraud. So she hasn't really got a very good track record herself, has she really?
No.
But you know,
that's it.
But yeah, so basically Dawn's boyfriend stated that Dawn was incensed that her father was preventing her from joining him, and he claimed that she was just so worn out from the years of physical abuse, just as Butch was, and that's when, well,
according to Butch.
That's right, according to Butch, Dawn allegedly approached her older brother, obviously Butch, about killing the parents. Butch said initially he refused, but after mixing drugs and alcohol, Butch stated he finally gave in to the macabre requests of his sister. This is mad. At this point, he then approached the two friends that were in the basement with them. God knows what was happening at this point.
Gosh.
This is mad. To get involved, and they all agreed. So literally, Butch approached his two mates about killing his parents, and they agreed. And Dawn was the one, obviously. It seems Dawn instigated it, which is crazy. But then, after they all agreed to do it, they obviously put a plan into action. And then Dawn and Butch left the safety of the basement, creeping up to the parents' bedroom with the shotgun. Whoa!
This is, oh my God.
This is mad.
Is this what actual, facts have we actually got on this? Is this allegedly?
No. This is physically, after the murder.
They actually did.
This is what Butch stated originally in his police file, and he's also repeated it to several journalists. This is what he's actually said verbatim, that they all went down to the basement after, as you said, the frenzied state of the house. His dad obviously approached him again about the robbery. They argued. Then they kind of cussed the parents and went down to the basement. Dawn, him and two mates, and they got stoned. And somehow, well, they're probably listening to the music as well. They decided to kill the parents.
Do you think Butch has fabricated this story put onus onto somebody else and to take the blame off him?
Well, no, because he actually admits to shooting his mum and dad.
So he obviously brought other people into the picture equation to make it look like they were part of it.
Well, as we know, the murder occurred within less than 5 minutes. Is it less than 5 minutes or 6 minutes?
It was 15 minutes actually. It was around 1 a.m. on November the 13th, 1974, while one friend waited as a lookout, the other with his Colt Python followed Butch, who had armed himself with a 35 Marlin rifle.
Well, this is one. So that would make sense, because one of the big questions that I had about the Amityville, the brothers were on one floor, the sisters on the other floor, etc. Blah blah blah. Now, if somebody was shot, the sound of that gun would ricochet throughout of the property, but everyone seemed to be asleep. This is terrifying. So yeah, okay.
Well, if to go into different rooms, because allegedly they entered the different rooms to the two sons, the two daughters, and the mum and dad.
Well, in the movie, that's where it does.
You'd wake up, wouldn't you, in the house?
Yeah, exactly.
And you'd be screaming and running around and etc. So how were they all found in bed in the same place on their front?
And there's 4 of them. Do you know what?
How?
I don't
get it.
Well, this is what I think happened, but we'll talk about our theories after. But Butch recalls a votive candle burning on his father's dresser. He recalls the bathroom light being on, and he recalls a military-style flashlight that was later recovered by the police on the brown recliner in the hallway outside the master bedroom. These were the only light source. At that point, Butch and his friend attacked his parents while they lay in bed. Mr. DeFeo, however, was able to struggle to his feet to attempt a counter-attack, but a second bullet struck him dead before he could reach his target. Louise DeFeo lay in bed, moaning for help, as she slowly bled to death. It was the second bullet that finally killed her. Although the original plan called for the younger children to be taken to the grandparents' house in Brooklyn, Dawn, according to Butch, killed them to eliminate the children as witnesses and potential threats. Butch claimed he was not in the house at the time the children's murders occurred. His friend, who was keeping watch, fled the house, and Butch followed in order to lure him back to the house to help with the clean-up.
Reading between the lines and the evidence, Dawn callously ordered her brother's face down, a clue that DeFeos were awake at the time of the murders rested in the final position of Marc DeFeo's body, because Marc had suffered a debilitating injury from football. He was forced to sleep on his back.
Wow.
Yet he was shot face down in bed. The prosecutor confirmed this fact at the DeFeo trial. The next room Dawn entered was Allison's. Standing at the doorway, Dawn raised the rifle, taking aim as Allison slightly raised her head before shooting her. The bullet impacted Allison's left cheek and exited her right ear.
Oh, that's awful.
Butch, on his return, confronted Dawn in her third-floor bedroom after briefly wrestling for the gun. Butch got the upper hand and forced Dawn against the bed, knocking her out. As she lay unconscious on her bed, Butch shot Dawn in the back of her head and ended the murder spree before the clean-up was said to have begun.
This is, I must say, Lisa, that would make a lot of sense if, obviously these are things that were never covered in the book, and I do believe that probably the reason why we were never told about these, and unless you do the research, the reason why we wasn't, because it doesn't make such a good story for the haunting. It's really awful. But anyway,
the way, I have thought that how can, that when bless their souls, the murders take place and they're all, face down, and it was obviously a very calculated, arranged by more than, a few of them.
Do you know, but I couldn't kill anybody, but I probably would be able to kill an adult more than children. I don't think I couldn't kill a child or an animal. Full stop. It would just not that I could kill anybody, but what I'm just trying to say is that I think it would be more easier to do an adult than it would a child, or I don't know what was going through the woman's head.
I'm a loving soul. I'm a very forgiving soul.
No,
very
but what I'm
soft soul.
Oh, I know, babe.
These people are how they actually get. I do believe, and this is where we're going to go on to in future episode of the Amityville Horror. Is I do believe in demonic possession. I do believe they. So you believe
demonic possession possessed all four of them?
Possessed with demons. I think they're evil. I think they're evil. It's evil activity. Their behaviour. There's no excuses.
Well, yeah,
you're
but
on
I
drugs.
think
Whatever's gone on. It's. We've all had our times. We've had challenges and difficulties to get through, but it's demonic.
I just think that
they're possessed. I do believe they was evil and negative and had those tendencies. It was demonic.
I think probably a lot of it was to do with genetics and drugs and alcohol. But soon after they cleaned up the house, as we've got to that's the reason why he went back to get his friend. But soon after they cleaned the house up, Butch made his way to Henry's Bar, a tavern located in the corner of Merrick Road and Ocean Avenue in Amityville. Bursting into the bar, he yelled, "You got to help me. I think my mother and father were shot." Now, I go into Amityville. This bar is less than 10 minutes away. On the corner, you've got all the takeaways. It's now takeaways. And then, so basically, you walk down his street, which was I'd probably say 5 minutes walking down the street. But if you ran, it would take less than 10 minutes. And then we burst into the bar. But anyway, all the people that were in the bar were sat around drinking. One was Robert Kelsey, a brick mason, and Butch's best friend. He raced over to Butch, who had fallen to his knees. At this point, he helped Butch to his feet and called to the other patrons in the actual bar and said, "Come on, we've got to go." At that point, they all jumped into Butch's car, and the people that jumped into Butch's car is John Altere, Joey Yesuwate, I'm pronouncing these wrongs, but I do apologise in advance, Al Saxton, and William Scordamani-Gallia, who owned the bar. And then they basically sped round to Butchie's home, and that's when they all jumped out the car frantically, but they would have got there in seconds.
Yeah, Bobby stopped the car and they all climbed out. Bobby went first and opened the unlocked door to the DeFeo home, finding the house in silence except for the barking dogs, Faye and Shabby, who were tied up inside of the kitchen's back door. With Bobby in the lead, the 5 men made their way to the second floor. Bobby, a regular visitor to the DeFeo household, knew exactly where the master bedroom was located. As they entered the bedroom, they saw Big Ronnie, 43, and his wife dead. Dried blood was near the entry wound. In contrast, Butch's mother's wounds were not clearly visible as she was buried beneath an orange blanket.
Ugh.
John Altera remained on the second floor and checked out the northeast bedroom, where he discovered the bodies of the 2 young boys face down like their parents.
Whoa. It was at this point the men gathered on the ground floor. There, Joe called 911, giving details of the emergency. Whoa. Okay, now, as we already said, we're going to break this down into 2 episodes. Next week, me and Lisa will discuss the immediate aftermath and how one of the members of the people that were in the property during this period actually called Greenwich Village. That's one of the things that we're going to touch on. And the second part, we will then discuss the Lutz family and the hauntings, which, Lisa, you are more into all this haunting stuff. So, yeah, this is one of the things that we're going to cover, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, I certainly am. I mean, it's the Amityville horror, the DeFeos. It's a
Lutz
calculated massacre. It's horrendous. And then the aftermath that comes after on the spiritual side, I'm more sort of in tune with we call them the dead, don't we? The deceased I class them as the living dead. I do believe that when the dying or the deceased move over, they become the living dead. They're still alive.
Yeah.
And we'll be talking about the supernatural happenings and nightmares and conspiracy theories about the Amityville.
Definitely. But my main thing is, what I've learnt from today is that if we hadn't got the book and the way the book was written for the Lutz to support the Lutz story, we wouldn't have had any of the other movies. Meg Ryan wouldn't have a career. We wouldn't have had Amityville 4, Amityville 5, Amityville Next Generation. We wouldn't have had any of these movies if it wasn't for the original movie being tailored towards the ghostly experiences here and after. For me, if they had told the original story, which we've uncovered and we've followed police records and also Butchie's actual statements, there wouldn't be any other movies. There wouldn't be a movie because it really ends with what's going on. My 2 things is, obviously one of the people that committed the crimes is dead, but there were 2 witnesses. So the 2 witnesses were erased, and also his girlfriend, wife with child, was erased. But anyway, we are going to discuss that in the next episode.
Our listeners, what's their knowledge of the build-up to the actual massacres itself?
Did you know any of what we've uncovered?
Did you know any of this we're talking about? Because when you talk about the Amityville horror, everyone all of a sudden goes supernatural, ghosts, ghouls, and all that, and demons. But do you know? Let us know your feedback
in the details below, in the box below the comment section.
On Sobrin and Lisa about the actual facts that happened to the build-up to the massacres.
Exactly.
The DeFeo family.
Did you know any of the stuff which we've discussed this evening? If so, I want to know your thoughts. Lisa wants to know your thoughts. We want to then be able to discuss your thoughts next week. But everybody that comments is going to get a 10% discount because me and Lisa became very proud ambassadors for Oriental Drift, which is also called OD Collective. Go to OD Collective, which is www.od capitals then lowercase collective, which is COLLECTIV.com. And when you make a purchase on checkout, you put either my name, which is Bryn, Bryn, CJ Hammond, think CJ from Baywatch, CJ who used to be in Baywatch, so CJ, so it's Bryn, Bryn, CJ Hammond, HAMMOND, in the checkout, and then you'll get 10% off. Or Lisa's, which is, Lisa, would you like to give your discount code?
Yes, my discount code is MS Lisa Appleton. And Oriental Drift, I'm so proud. Thank you so much for making me and Bryn ambassadors of Oriental Drift, OD Collective, streetwear, amazing fashion, absolutely wonderful.
One
and
thing,
I cannot wait to wear Phoenix bomber jacket. Oh my God, I've ordered it.
I know, but do you know what? A lot of people do say, oh, we're ambassadors for a brand. I'll tell you one of them, Trisha Paytas, she's an ambassador for farting. I'm joking. But she's an ambassador for a lot of things. But me and you are very selective what we actually become ambassadors for. We've been offered a lot of ambassadors roles to represent clothing companies and cosmetics. You've got your own clothing cosmetic range, which is all organic, which we both developed. But we decided for Oriental Drift. One reason that we decided with Oriental Drift is that the quality of the fabric, it is actually top notch. And not only that, it's not made in a sweatshop factory as a lot of brands are. And so that's one of the things which me and Lisa are proud of, that it's equal wages. Oriental Drift. They do equality. They do equality. And not only that, their clothing and their threads are absolutely amazing. The threads are really good.
Quality,
guys,
absolutely.
And if
Dolls, you're gonna love Oriental Drift, OD Collective, streetwear fashion, absolutely fantastic choices, and you're gonna feel great when you wear it, and it keeps.
Well, you're gonna look great. You're gonna look great.
You was when it was raining.
Yeah, I know. I got dry. Well, do you know the jacket which I actually purchased, right? I can't pronounce the name of what it was, but the reason why I purchased that Pacific top was because, I'm not sure if you've ever watched it, Silly Side Squad, but Harlequin has got a very similar jacket to the one which I purchased. And because I'm a huge Harlequin fan, I love, what's the actress's name? Margot Robbie. I love Margot Robbie. I think she's one of the best actresses currently working in Hollywood. I think she's really talented. So anyway, I love the character Harlequin. She reminds me a bit of Tank Girl. But anyway, the jacket which I purchased, the Yokaza, what's that called? The
Yokaza. And Bryn, I bought it. I bought it too.
So I know, copycat.
Oh my God.
But it's reversible. That's the best thing about it. It's reversible, so you can either have it light blue.
Phoenix bomber, and so cool. Absolutely.
There you go.
Honestly, everybody check out Oriental Drift.
Oriental Drift.
You're gonna feel hip hop. You're gonna feel brilliant.
Lisa, is that even a word? Joking. No, you are gonna feel confident if you go out. They're not, they are. I really like their threads. Oriental Drift is the company's name, but it's www.OD Collective. Again, that's COLLECTIVEW.com, and you'll have the details below. There will be details below. But anyway, Lisa.
And mention
my code.
MS Lisa Appleton and Bryn's. What's yours?
Bryn CJ Hammond on checkout. So you could say if you bought either a pair of shades or a hat or a beanie, then you could use my code, because you're only allowed to use the code once. So if you use my code and then use Lisa's, or Lisa's then use mine, you'll get the 10% off twice. We didn't say that though. But anyway.
Oh yeah, we need to.
But you can do that. That's why you're listening. And thank you for all listening. Next week, we are going to be covering, as I said, on the 17th of June, we will be focusing on the aftermath, including George and Kathy Luke's claims that the house is haunted. But until next week, Lisa, this has been what?
So. This has been Sobering and Lisa.
Yeah. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you guys comment below. We love you.
Stay safe, stay alert.
Hashtag on Twitter. So yeah, but they have to if they talk to us, they need to hashtag Sobering and Lisa, spelled Bryn and as in IND Lisa. So hashtag us and we will respond if you hashtag us. We love you all. Until next week, good night.
Yes, love you all.
Bye.
Good night, stay safe, stay alert.
Bye.